Hello and welcome to the channel. As always, like the video, and if you enjoyed the story, leave a comment on if you would want more. This fan fiction was not created by me, but in the description there is a link to the fanfic so you can show your support to the creator and read along. Without any more delay, let's dive into the story.
Nazarick, 10th floor, Royal Chambers. It was still the night of their wedding as Ainz and Taylar lounged on the couch in the Royal Chambers. Technically, it was the next morning they supposed, but it wasn't like either of them had gone to sleep yet. Albedo was sprawled out in the bed sleeping away the exhaustion. Pregnancy made her even more demanding than normal, but it also tired her out quicker. That is why Ainz and Taylar were currently sitting on the couch in their room going through the NPC information in Nazarick. It was convenient to be able to check their level progress without them having to be present, and they wanted to see how everyone had come along. Ainz was now certain that it was impossible for him to get truly drunk as he had drunk enough to kill an elephant. He barely had a buzz, so he and Taylar decided to do some work before everyone would start their day, probably much later than normal judging from the reception they had. Did you happen to check mine or Albedo's information to see if we got the title of guild co-leader like we thought we might? Taylar asks Ainz as she looks at the Pleiades information. It completely slipped my mind, to be honest. I'll take a look at mine and see if it changed anything. Ainz says as he pulls up his information in the master source. Well, I believe it worked. It says co-leader next to my name, so you should be able to access everything in the tomb that I could. Ainz says to Taylar, I can see the co-leader title on my information too. It seems that it worked as we thought it would. Did you check Albedo's info dash? Taylar's question is cut off by Ainz. What the hell? Ainz blurts out. What's wrong, my love? Taylar asks as she scoots closer to Ainz and takes a look at his window. Look at Albedo's character information now. Ainz says to her. Well, she also got co-leader, so I'm not sure. Taylar trails off as she gazes at the rest of Albedo's character information. That's strange, her karma value changed. Where the hell did her settings go? She finally asks after looking over the information 3 times. I have no idea, but all of her settings have disappeared. I didn't think that would even be possible. Do you think this will affect Albedo's behavior at all? Ainz asks Taylar. I have absolutely no idea. We will just have to keep an eye on her for any changes in the coming weeks. However, this might be a good thing. Taylar tells him. What do you mean by that? Ainz asks her. Perhaps she will accept those from outside of Nazarick more readily than it has taken her in the past, or be able to forge her own path instead of trying to match ours. Of course, there is always the possibility that now without her settings she could murder us in our sleep and take over Nazarick, but I highly doubt that happening. Luckily, we are going to be spending plenty of time in Nazarick for the coming months, so it will be easier to see if she has changed in any way. Taylar responds to Ainz. True. I suppose we can't do anything but keep an eye out for now. Did you get a chance to finish looking at the Pleiades information? Are our clear-out mission for them having any results? Ainz asks Taylar. Yes, they seem to be doing well. All of them are above the level they were when we came to this world, and it seems they are continuing to grow. The rate they are gaining experience is certainly due to the experience crystals we installed in all their gear, but it is working nonetheless. We should continue to let them handle most of the monsters we come across since it appears we cannot gain any experience in this world. Taylar tells him. Well, about us not being able to gain experience in this world. I believe Sir Shauna was researching how to break the level cap. It may be possible for us to actually go about level 100. Ainz tells her. Did he finish his research? By the sound of it, he didn't. Taylar responds. I'm not sure. The book of his I was using for my undead experiments was the one that had the research in it. His research on breaking level cap was near the end of the book, and the book ended before his research was complete. I think it might be in one of the other books we got, but it's possible that we don't have the book with the rest of the research. Ainz tells her. Have you had the time to look through the other books? How many did we get exactly? I have yet to look at any of the things we got from the slain Theocracy's vault. Taylar asks him. There are 20 in total we gathered. I haven't had time to look through the others since I've been so focused on my undead creation experiments. However, I have Solutions, CZ Delta, and Aura looking through the others for me. I should know in a day or two if there is any more research on it in the books we have, he tells her. Speaking of the army you are creating, how is that going? After witnessing what one Death Knight did to a theocracy scripture, I'd imagine that the army wouldn't have to be that big to be unbeatable.
Taylar says to him,
Oh, but you know I can't help myself, beloved wife. Ainz grins. Not only have I been able to create an army of Death Knights that would probably take over this world themselves, but with Sershana's notes I realized that the undead I can create is not limited by what you could make in Yggdrasil. Ainz finishes. So, we don't just have an army of Death Knights and Soul Eaters then? Taylar asks him, and Ainz's grin grows wider. Definitely not. I have created not a single Soul Eater. Instead, I used my create high-tier undead to make them all Winter Whites. Crazy, blue undead warriors who are great commanders in their own right. Any they slay are instantly raised after they die under the Winter Whites' command. And they don't make weak-ass zombies or skeletons. They create high-tier undead themselves. Ainz replies. Well, that is certainly different, was the creature in Sershana's notes. Taylar asks. No, but after going through his notes, I realized that he was creating undead based on his experience playing tabletop RPGs. As you know, everyone thought I was wasting my time learning that when we had virtual reality at our beck and call. Now, I realize I can make all kinds of different undead. Also, I'm not sure if you have tried it yet, but if you use your Summon Angel ability and there is a body present like when I create undead, it is permanent. Ainz tells her. You're kidding me? Taylar almost yells. So, I could be helping you bolster the army? You can if you like. It allows me to make 3 different types of fallen angels. A warrior, a caster, and an archer. All of them are level 40, so they aren't overpowered, but they almost are by this world's standards. The casters can use tier 5 magic. The army will be unstoppable. How big are we going to make it? It doesn't sound like it needs to be very big at all. Taylar asks. I don't plan on ever letting it stop growing. If you want the whole world, it is going to take a considerable army to keep the peace and be able to defend our land. I say as long as we have bodies for it, we should grow our ranks. Speaking of experiments, how have yours been going? Ainz asks her. Well, now that you told me about the angels, I'll have to try it and let you know about that. If you mean my newfound hobby as the goddess of love, Peter and Henry seem to be getting along fine. It's not like they are married or anything, but it seems to be going in a good direction for them. But I'm sure you mean my magic experiments, and those have some interesting results. Oh, all my spells seem to do exactly what they did in Yggdrasil. What spells do you have that are different here? Ainz is curious now. Of course yours do. You know nothing but attack and buff spells, love. Taylar giggles at him. There are a few that are slightly different, but the big one is a super tier spell. Do you remember the super tier spell I have called Origin of Species? She asks him. Yes, if I recall, everyone thought it was the weakest super tier spell ever created. At least until you showed them how valuable it could be. Ainz finishes with a grin thinking of when she used it last. That was certainly one of my proudest moments. The look on everyone's face after I used it, and we basically walked through the Lich King raid, was priceless. I don't think I'll ever forget that, she replies. From what I remember, it was a buff spell that temporarily granted everyone in the party another racial template. It gave everyone the racial immunities and resistances of whichever race you choose, correct? Ainz recites what he remembers about that particular spell. Yes, you are correct, but it is entirely different here. First, the cooldown on the spell is not 15 minutes like it used to be. Instead, the cooldown is 1 year. Ainz can't help but shout at that. Why would such a useless spell suddenly have such a long cooldown? If you'd let me finish, you would find out jumpy. Taylar glares at him. As I was saying, the cooldown is 1 year, but the effects are way different. Well, not very different, but different enough that I am fine with a 1-year cooldown. Ainz calmed down, and now he was getting impatient at her beating around the bush. And Taylar can't help but giggle at his impatience. And it is no longer an AoE buff spell for a party. Instead, it is a single target spell with a permanent duration. It allows me to change someone's race permanently. There are races in my head from this spell that I honestly have no idea what they are. They must be ones from this world, since I have never heard of some of them. I was hoping you might help me with that. You always did love reading old tabletop RPG monster manuals. Maybe you might know what some of these races are. Taylar can see Ainz is rather excited about this prospect. She was honestly excited about it also. The possibility of creating races that didn't exist before was quite welcome to the goddess of life and creation. I'll help any way I can. Tell me a couple of the races you never heard of, and I'll see if I know anything about them. Ainz tells her. All right, I'll try a few. Taylar closes her eyes and concentrates on the list forming in her mind when she thinks of that spell. What is a Nazarick? Ainz almost stops breathing at that question. There's no way she just said that. One of his favorite races to ever exist in fantasy games? He couldn't be that lucky. Yes, I do. Can you tell me, is AK Chazar another race on that list? He asks Taylar. She closes her eyes for a moment before opening them and answering. Yes, they are. How did you know that? She asks him as she watches his face light up in glee. How about you, Auntie? Malbranche? Yugoloth? Lilitu? Yulithard? With every name he rattles off, he watches Taylar nodding her head with her eyes closed. He feels like a kid in a candy store every time she nods at him. How do you know all these races? Taylar finally asks when he stops rattling off names. As you said, I love tabletop RPGs. Those are all races I remember from them. I named most of those because they're my favorites. A Nazarick is a type of Rakshasa. Where Rakshasa are natural sorcerers, Nazarick are natural assassins, and the AK Chazar are Rakshasa necromancers. They are all considered Rakshasa, but all three have natural affinities for different things. Yuan-Ti is a race of human snake people. Malbranche are a type of devil. They are sort of like the Death Knights of the devil race. Strong, hardy, and take commands well but don't think well for themselves. Yugoloth are a race of tiger folk, and like the Rakshasa, they have a few different types. Lilitu are a type of demon, kind of like a lesser version of a succubus, but they are divine spellcasters naturally. Yulithard are stronger versions of mind flayers, psionic abominations, much stronger natural psions, but take longer to mature. Ainz informs Taylar. I still have no idea how you memorized all these things. At least it is coming in handy now, she giggles at him. Oh, there are plenty more I wish to know if you can make. We can leave that for later though. How do you plan on using that super tier spell? Honestly, with its new effects, it might be worth it for me to waste the experience and learn it myself. Ainz responds. I was thinking maybe I could offer it as a reward. Kind of like an employee of the year thing, but specific to those of this world. I don't want to change anyone's race in Nazarick. Perhaps someone like Henry would want it changed if she and Peter get serious enough. Peter has the potential to live forever if he progresses as an angel far enough. I could use it for something like that, I suppose. Do you have any ideas? Taylar replies to Ainz. Not at the moment, but I do agree that would be a good use of it. There is no reason to use it on anyone from Nazarick, so that only leaves these new worlders. Ainz and Taylar had been so lost in their discussion that neither had noticed Albedo stretch herself out and quietly make her way over to them on the couch until she was standing before both of them. She was still naked as the day she was born or created, or well, they weren't technically naked when they were created. Having beings that were created and not born made little statements like that confusing to both of them. Albedo didn't hesitate for a moment when they saw her standing before them in all her naked glory. She sat directly in Ainz's lap and stretched her legs over Taylar's lap, so she was touching both of them. She put her head in the crook of Ainz's neck and enjoyed the feeling of Ainz rubbing her back and thighs while Taylar did the same to her calves and feet. It felt so wonderful, she couldn't help the content sigh that escaped her lips as she relaxed into their touch. "Did you enjoy your nap, my queen?" Ainz asked her when he saw the content smile on her lips. It never failed to make Albedo smile when Ainz addressed her as his queen. It didn't matter to her that she wasn't his only queen. Taylar was just as loving as Ainz was to her. She had been even more so since they found out she was pregnant. "I did, my king," she whispered in his ear. Albedo kisses him just below his earlobe and trails her tongue down his neck before giving a playful, light bite to his shoulder. "There is little I find more appealing than a nap after my king and queen have worn me out." "Pregnancy really does make you insatiable, doesn't it, Albedo?" Taylar giggles at her. "The pregnancy was not needed to make me as such. You both are already irresistible, to begin with. Plus, it is our honeymoon now, isn't it? Aren't we supposed to lose ourselves in each other during such a time?" The innocent-sounding voice that asked that last question lost all its innocence if you looked into those mischievous eyes. "We certainly are, my sultry little demon, and I know exactly what you mean." Ainz lightly runs his fingers down Albedo's spine, and she is hit with a wave of anticipation as his fingers make her way between her wings. "It's hard not to picture what I would rather be doing to both of you every time I lay my eyes on you." Albedo couldn't help herself. She took Ain's lips in a passionate kiss while her hands roamed all over him, from his shoulders down to his chest, then to his abs and back up again. She went down his shoulders and back before finally breaking the kiss. This man is perfect." She can't help but think to herself as she touches every inch of him she is able to. Albedo feels a feather-light touch on the sole of her foot and lets out a little giggle. She looks down and sees Taylar with a slight pout on her face. Albedo already knows what that look is for. She slides out of Ain's lap and straddles Taylar's lap instead. She kisses Taylar with just as much passion, but differently. Albedo has already learned that Taylar likes it a little rougher than Ainz does, so she is much more playful with her. She makes sure her fingers press harder into Taylar as she roams her perfect form. She even adds a playful little pull to Taylar's hair before she breaks the kiss. "I'm sorry, my queen. I didn't mean to leave you out, but I do only have one mouth." Albedo winks at Taylar. She is still in her lap and has her arms around Taylar's neck. "You are even more playful and witty than normal today, Albedo. How are you feeling?" Taylar wasn't lying. Albedo is usually not nearly so forward in her banter. She usually needed to see Taylar and Ainz start doing it before she would join in, but here she was initiating it. Taylar and Ainz both wondered if this had something to do with her settings disappearing and her karma value changing after their wedding. "To be honest, I feel different," Albedo says, and it doesn't surprise either Ainz or Taylar in the least. "How so?" Ainz asks. It's hard to explain. Albedo trails off looking for the right words to say. "It feels as though I finally, truly belong with the both of you. As much as you both helped me beforehand, I always felt inadequate compared to you two. Almost as if I was being tied down or held back and only truly seeing myself as the guardian overseer. No matter what you said or did, there was always this voice in the back of my mind telling me I was simply here to learn from you, take your guidance, and carry out your will. Now, though, I truly feel like a queen. It is as if some weight has been lifted off me, or that voice has finally been silenced, and I am right where I am supposed to be. It could be because we finally united our love in front of all of Nazarick. Perhaps it is because I can finally feel my firm belly and know I will be making a contribution to Nazarick more valuable than any plan or number of subjects we could gain. I'm not really sure, but I have never been so ready to look to the future instead of only living in the present. We might have a little idea as to why that is." Ainz tells Albedo, who is still in Taylar's lap. "Yes, before your wonderful interruption. We were checking each other's information, and you have been made co-leader of the guild just as myself and Ainz have. Now that you have all the access to Nazarick that Ainz and I have, it doesn't surprise me you feel differently." "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt." Albedo starts to get out of Taylar's lap, so she can sit between them. There was enough space for her to fit, and she just needed to swing her leg over. She felt two hands firmly grip her hips, and she looked down to see Taylar, holding her in place instead. I did say it was wonderful, did I not? Taylar arches her brow at Albedo. A naked, glowing, demon goddess using my lap as a chair is a most welcome distraction. Taylar couldn't help but say those words as her lips and nose traveled up Albedo's chest and neck, ending it with a playful bite on her earlobe. She never touched Albedo with either, letting her words and breath do the trick until the end. Albedo always smelled like flowers and something else. Taylar knew that something else was a pheromone Albedo naturally let off being a succubus that increased sexual desire for her. It made it all the more fantastic knowing Taylar could make this succubus tremble with desire when she saw the goosebumps on Albedo's flesh. It would be a tremendous ego booster to anyone, of any race or any gender, to make a being so naturally sexual shudder with desire. They only ceased gazing intensely into each other's eyes when Ainz cleared his throat. And you called her insatiable. Ainz looks at Taylar calling her out knowing she was just as bad. How about we finish up our talk while both of you can still make complete sentences? Ainz couldn't help the smirk that crossed his lips. He had become intimately familiar with the celestial and infernal languages during their time together. They liked to string together sentences that would sound like incoherent babbling to most as they lost themselves in each other, but Ainz knew it was nothing but a mix of common, celestial, and infernal. Albedo figured he was right, and it would be better to get all of this over with now, so it wasn't coming up during the rest of their honeymoon. She twisted to the spot between Ainz and Taylar. She kept her legs draped across Taylar and leaned back to put her head on Ainz's shoulder. She kept leaning and leaning and leaning until she noticed Ainz was standing in front of the couch. I thought we were discussing the rest of Nazarick? Why did you get up? Taylar asked when she saw the pout on Albedo's face. We are. Albedo can catch us up on the homunculi maids. We haven't talked about them yet. I just have to grab something. I will be able to hear you. I'm not going far. Ainz replies to her as he starts making his way across the room. Their training is going well. They have completely devoted themselves to it, and it is really showing. We have had 2 more groups begin taking levels in other classes. That gives us a total of 6 magic casters, 3 divine and 3 arcane, for warrior types, 1 rogue, and 1 ranger. The rest are still putting all their experience towards being more efficient maids just as the others did before taking other classes. Albedo informs Taylar and Ainz. This brought another question from Ainz as he made his way back towards them. Did the benefit of increasing their maid levels continue to improve? Were there any other benefits? The need for less and less food continued to the point that when they were max level for the class, the amount of food they need to sustain themselves was that of an average, healthy human. The benefit we didn't notice wasn't very noticeable until they were near the max level. It seems their strength, speed, agility, and stamina all increased as well. It only takes them a quarter of the time to clean an area it used to, so something that used to take an hour now takes about 15 minutes. That, in turn, has helped them with their martial and magical training. Well, that is always great to hear. Is there anything else about them we should be aware of? Taylar was hoping the answer was going to be a no when she asked. Moving on to the next item and getting this over with was paramount in her mind right now. That's about it. Mamanga's new leveling method is working rather well. They are gaining levels faster than we thought they would be able to. What did you call it again? Power leveling. Ainz chuckles. Some call it cheating or exploiting, but I call it a time saver and safety measure. Well, it is working. Our little mini Taylar can almost cast tier 2 spells already. Ainz finally sat down after setting 2 ornately carved boxes on the table, but put his right leg down as if he was going to sit Indian style. He let his left leg hand over the couch so he could face Taylar and Albedo. He draped his arm over Albedo's shoulder and over her body until his hand rested on her hip. He gently pulled her towards him so she could rest against his chest, and he looked at Taylar. It was quite obvious now from her tone, demeanor, and playful jokes that Albedo was different. He certainly didn't mind it, She seemed more like a regular person than a creation. Well, if a regular person was a level 100 succubus warrior who looked like the embodiment of desire and could crush a man's spine with 2 of her fingers. I like the new you. Ainz whispers in her ear. Bolder, funnier, more confident, if that was even possible, and even more beautiful than I ever imagined. Albedo had to shut her eyes and lean back into Ainz to ground herself in reality at his words. It was one thing to feel different, but to have her love tell her she was growing into an even greater woman, it sent waves of desire and contentment running through her.
I am.
Taylar clears her throat. Weren't we supposed to finish our discussion? Or was that just a ploy to steal Albedo out of my lap and into yours? She raises her eyebrow in question. That's exactly what it seemed like he was doing to her. Technically, she is still in your lap. Ainz points to Albedo's thighs draped over Taylar's. But you are right. So, how have you been feeling, Albedo? I feel fine, love. Why? I mean, is everything all right with the pregnancy? That is what I meant. Other than being able to feel it with my own hands finally and actually being able to be pushed to exhaustion, everything is fine. I never thought I'd actually require sleep if I did too much in a day. It is certainly worth it, though. Albedo can't help but brush her hand across her belly as she finishes that statement. Ainz had to agree, but then again, he wasn't the one growing a life inside of him, so his opinion didn't hold as much weight. How is it we can already feel your firm belly? Isn't it too early for that? Ainz asked her after a minute. Normally, yes. Yuri believes it is either because there are 2 of them in there, or my pregnancy will be shorter than a human's. If it is because of the twins, it should be about 9 months, but if it is because of a shorter pregnancy, it should only be 6 to 8 months before I give birth. She couldn't give a definitive answer because it was too early to tell. Well, let's hope it is a faster pregnancy. I sure hope mine is only 6 months when I take that step. Is there anything else we need to discuss? We already went over the war preparations with everyone the day before the wedding. Does anything about Demiurge, Shaltir, Solution, or anyone else doing other work need discussing now? Taylar seemed eager to get this discussion over with and back to their honeymoon. I don't really think so. Demiurge is still gathering intel in the Holy Kingdom and slain theocracy. Solution is helping him with his mission. He did ask for 6 doppelgangers that I agreed to give him along with the shadow demons and Hanzos he already had. What did he need the doppelgangers for? You didn't give him the same ones we used to play us, did you? Taylar asks Ainz. He needed to replace a few nobles with his own people, so I agreed. I certainly didn't summon the greater doppelgangers we use as our decoys. He only needs to impersonate low-level human nobles, so there was no reason for greater doppelgangers. They cost way too much money to use them like that. It was 10,000 gold to summon one, wasn't it? Albedo asks him. It was. Not that much to us, but we can't just go wasting 10,000 gold whenever we feel like it. The ones he was granted are more than adequate for the job. How is Shaltir taking to her new assignment? Taylar asks. So far, she hasn't had any issues. As we agreed, it was too dangerous to let her intel gather on the ground, so she is spending 4 hours a day, 3 days a week with Oriel. She is teaching her what to look for, what is important to gather, and things of that nature. She should have a firm grasp of the Southern Holy Kingdom by the time she is needed. I was thinking. Ainz pauses a moment to figure out how to best word this. What is it, love? Albedo asks. Perhaps we should have Shaltir help Demiurge with the slain theocracy when the time comes. She has already appeared there, albeit briefly, as a powerful villain. If we could pair her up with Demiurge, I believe it would benefit her greatly. What do you think she could gain from it? Taylar asks. Shaltir is too straightforward. She wants to know what needs destroyed and point her in that direction to destroy it. Demiurge, on the other hand, thinks like a defensive commander, not to mention how cunning he is. If Shaltir were to learn when to best use force or defense and learn some of Demiurge's cunning, well, she would be even more formidable than she is now. Do you think it wise to have someone with so little experience help with a plan to subjugate what will probably be our second toughest nation to subdue? Albedo asks with genuine curiosity. She felt absolutely no rivalry with Shelter anymore, but still couldn't help the occasional jape at her expense. Albedo doubted she would ever get tired of watching the vampire fume in front of her. It was just too amusing. Demiurge will still do the majority of the planning. I really just want Shelter to witness it and ask questions so she can learn. Then when the time comes, we can unleash her on the Southern Holy Kingdom and slain theocracy. Do you mind if I make a suggestion about the Southern Holy Kingdom, Taylar? Albedo asks her. There isn't much you could do to please me more, and I'm sure we will get to all those other things after we are finished. What did you have in mind? Taylar looks downright lecherous as she eyes up Albedo. Before that, Albedo starts. Are you two having some sort of contest as to who can turn me on the most today? A girl can only take so much before she needs her release. Albedo can't help the playful smile that comes across her lips. She had no idea what had come over Ainz and Taylar, but they both seemed to be extra attentive to her today. Perhaps they were concerned over her pregnancy, but other than the one question, everything else had been purely sexual in nature. Maybe she was right, and honeymoons really were nothing but teasing and pleasing.
No.
Ainz says from behind her and starts lightly running his fingers up her body. But that does sound like a fun contest. Oh, enough from you. Taylar huffs at him. You know damn well you would lose that bet, my love. She can't help but smirk at him. Go ahead with your suggestion, Albedo. It doesn't seem our husband can keep himself contained much longer. Albedo giggles at Taylar's statement before she continues. From what we have seen in the Holy Kingdom, it isn't really one nation, but two nations claiming to be one. The Holy Queen might reign over all of the Roble Holy Kingdom, but there is a clear divide between the North and the South. There is a strong chance that if Sheltir attacks the South after Demiurge starts his conquest of the North, that this will give them a reason to work together. It could actually unify them as one nation having to fight off such powerful foes. If we simply let Demiurge carry out his plan in the North, it is more likely the South will see it as a way to establish their dominance over the Holy Kingdom and leave the North to their fate, which would also create an even bigger rift between North and South, one I believe could never be repaired. Albedo waits a moment for them to see where she is going with this before continuing. When yourself and Ainz finally come to their aid, they will have next to nothing to offer since Demiurge will be killing their queen and her brother. We can ask for something trivial that they can't say they have no right to hand over, like any magic items we come across. Instead of asking for fealty, which none of the survivors could grant, we simply give them aid the South will more than likely refuse to give once you have defeated Demiurge. That will not only win over the people of the Northern Holy Kingdom in our favor, but drive an even bigger wedge between North and South. The South is more like the slain theocracy than the North is, so they will see any aid given by heteromorphs as a deal with the devil. Eventually, that will lead to civil war, and that is when we step in again, save the Northern Holy Kingdom, crush any opposition in the South, and secure the entire Holy Kingdom. That is a great idea, Albedo. It would mean we would barely need to use any of our troops and risk their lives. We will have to iron out the finer details, but I like it. I'll inform Demiurge of the change once our honeymoon is over. Albedo's smile at Taylar's words seems like one of triumph, as if she now truly is a queen of Nazarick. Taylar certainly didn't mind the plan. It would allow Sheltir to focus on the slain theocracy with Demiurge. Perhaps they could find something else for her to do when she would have been attacking the Southern Holy Kingdom. Please tell me, we are done now. Albedo has trouble getting those words out. Taylar looks over to see Ainz licking, sucking, and biting his way from her earlobe, down her neck, and onto her shoulder. His fingers are slowly making their way down her body in between her thighs. Albedo's chest is heaving and her breathing is heavy and erratic as Ainz teases her all over. I'm guessing from her husband's actions that we are? Taylar's tone sounded like a statement, but her body language made it seem more like a question as she raised an eyebrow at Ainz. The man forced them to focus on their plans, and he couldn't even keep himself under control. Taylar was about to lean in and join him in pleasing Albedo, but he suddenly stopped and stood up from the couch. "Where do you think you're going? Are you really going to tease Albedo like that, then leave the poor woman hanging?" Taylar questions him, and she crawls over towards Albedo. She had no problem picking up his slack if he had something else to do. "Oh no, both of you are just missing something before we continue." Ainz tells them before he opens the 2 boxes he set on the table. Inside are both Albedo and Taylar's crowns he gave them during the wedding ceremony. Taylar looks at him questioningly. "Do you expect us to get all regaled up so you can have your way with your queens? Perhaps we didn't properly thank you for our beautiful crowns?" Taylar asks. Albedo still can't control her breathing to ask anything at the moment. "No, your thanks for the crowns was unforgettable." Ainz smiles at the memory. "Don't worry. No need to get regaled up. The crowns are the only thing you two are going to be wearing." Ainz tells them with a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Well then, crown your queens and come over here and show us how much you love us." Taylar tells Ainz that while she helps pull a now recovered Albedo up, and they both kneel before Ainz. He crowns both his queens as they eagerly await what comes after. After he crowns them both, they stay where they are and take him in their hands, ready to thank him just as they did the first time. But before they can continue, Albedo says, "Why don't we just lock the door and spend our 10 days naked in this room for our honeymoon? Traveling the world sounds fun, but never letting you put clothes on for 10 days sounds much, much more appealing." Albedo's eyes meet Ainz after her question, but before Ainz can respond, he watches Albedo and Taylar lick his entire length. Neither broke his eye contact as they did, so he can only stutter out, "Ginti patkiru, flu." "Whatever, my queens, sire." It seems it wasn't only Taylar and Albedo who could be brought to a celestial, infernal, bumbling mess. Kamigami Shido, underground tunnels, 2 weeks later. Zesshi Zetsumii was in her usual spot guarding the sacred treasures of the slain theocracy. To anyone who was to observe her, they would think she was very nonchalant about her guard duty, but that is because they couldn't read her. Zesshi has been fuming for weeks now after that cowardly vampire attacked. She had been looking forward to fighting something that might actually be able to survive long enough to entertain her. The universe seemed to conspire against her, though. That vampire had summoned a skeletal dragon and fled. The vampire had acted like Zesshi wouldn't be able to beat such a monster. It didn't even last a minute against her, though, and Zesshi had rushed around the capital frantically searching for that damn monster. She searched the entirety of the city from top to bottom and didn't find anything. It was as if that vampire had never come if it wasn't for the destruction it left behind in the city. Zesshi had gone back to her post and had been waiting on word from the cardinals when they found the vampire so she could take that monster out. Now it was weeks later and still nothing. Zesshi was mad beyond mad. Most of the spells that vampire had cast, Zesshi had never heard of before. She assumed this meant she was pretty strong, but never got the opportunity to find out since the coward fled. So here she was, guarding this stupid vault that 99.9% of the world didn't even know existed while she waited for the cardinals and 1,000-mile astrologer to figure out where the monster went. She was about to resume her angry pacing back and forth in the hallway when she felt a presence at the end of the corridor. She looked down there and saw something that sent a feeling through her she had never experienced before. Fear. Standing there was a being in black metal armor. Twisted spikes were coming off the armor with tortured faces, writhing in agony between them. Its boots and gauntlets had the same spikes and faces covering them, but the item that gave her pause was the helmet this being was wearing. On top of his head, it wore a black helmet with twisted spikes that came up from where someone's temple would be. They curved back around the back of its head and looked almost like horns or a crown. 2 twisted spikes came down from where its chin would be, and right above it, instead of a mouth hole to breath, was a single tormented face. Its mouth was open in a silent scream as its eyes looked upward. It looked as if the face was screaming in terror at the glowing red eyes that bore into Zeshi's very soul. Normally, Zesshi would attack something appearing in this tunnel immediately. Very few people knew this place existed, and she knew the names of every one of those people. The reason she didn't was simple. She couldn't move. Her brain was still processing fear for the first time, and her brain didn't catch up to her instinct until the being started walking towards her and spoke. Zesshi Zetsumiai, extra seed of the Black Scripture, certain death, daughter of the Elf King, humanity's trump card, and slave of the slain theocracy, it is nice to finally meet you in person. Ainz can't help but agree with Taylar and Albedo about one thing. Wearing this helmet made his voice more intimidating somehow. There was no magic effect on this helmet that was supposed to do that, but it seemed to work that way anyhow. He rarely wore his entire set of armor, but this seemed like a good occasion for it. This half-elf possessed the only weapon Ainz has seen in this world that could actually do some damage to him. She wasn't nearly strong enough to defeat him, but it still warranted caution. That is why, even against his wishes, Taylar and Albedo had sent an invisible Rabido and Seabass to accompany Ainz. Ainz didn't stand a chance of winning a 2-on-1 battle when those two were Taylar and Albedo. No argument would sway either. When Albedo busted out the pregnant waterworks and cried about their children never knowing their father, well, Ainz just gave up. Zeshi's brain had finally processed her fear, and she willed herself to push it aside. She needed to do her job and prevent this monster from breaching the vault that contains the theocracy's sacred treasures. She grabs her scythe in both hands, crouches low, and begins activating her martial arts as the monster draws closer. Ability boost, greater ability, boost flow acceleration. Go ahead and power up. I'll wait. Ainz taunts as he impatiently taps his foot. Limit breaker, physical boost, gale, acceleration. Zesshi springs forward the moment she finishes, saying gale acceleration. She covers the distance in the blink of an eye. She starts to raise her scythe and says, "Single flash." A blinding flash of light goes off the moment she speaks the words. Zesshi knows to close her eyes when it goes off and finishes her combination as she brings her scythe down on her enemy. Severing strike. She feels her scythe strike something and stop. It is surprising she didn't simply cleave this monster in two, but it certainly must be close to dead if it isn't already. She opens her eyes, knowing the flash was over. She turns pale and starts to shake at what her eyes bear witness to when they open. Ainz saw Zesshi powering up and couldn't help but taunt her for two reasons. First, it is always fun to taunt someone. Second, he was hoping the taunt would cause her to activate all her martial arts. The first group she recited, he already knew about, so he was hoping she had ones he had never seen before. He wasn't disappointed. He had never seen gale acceleration, single flash, or severing strike. The effects of gale acceleration and single flash were pretty obvious the moment she used them. It might have been a good idea to let her hit him with severing strike to see what it did, but it gave Ainz a bad feeling when he thought about it, so he simply caught her attack with his left hand. To be more specific, he caught the snath of her scythe, but tomato. The look of sheer terror on her face when she opened her eyes was so hilarious he had to actively keep himself from laughing. Ainz guessed being by far the strongest person they had come across yet. She wasn't used to being considered weak, but that is exactly what that attack was. It probably seemed faster than the eye to a human, but to Ainz, she might as well have been attacking him underwater. Zesshi feels that fear again as she stares into the eyes of this monster and needs to put some distance between them quickly. She tries to jump back a bit and regain her senses, but that proves to be a big mistake. Ainz realized Zesshi had never had to think of tactics in her entire life, more than likely. The last thing a person should do when someone is holding their weapon is to leave their feet. Since he had a firm grip on her weapon, the moment she left the ground, her body was his to push, pull, or yank in any direction, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. When Zesshi jumped back, the last thing she thought she would feel would be her moving forward. Before she could process why that was, something impacted her stomach and chest with a force so great, She thought every rib in her body had broken. The tunnel started rushing by her quickly, and Zesshi realized she was flying through the tunnel. She looked towards where she came from and saw the monster holding her scythe in his left hand with his foot extended out in front of him. He seemed to be getting farther away by the second. Did he just kick me away? The moment the question ended in her mind, she slammed into the wall. The stone cracked in a spider web pattern, and a small crater formed behind her. Zesshi fell a couple inches off the ground and had to catch herself from falling over. Her legs were wobbly, and she felt something running down her nose. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand and noticed blood staining her skin. It was such an unusual sight that Zesshi didn't know how to react. She looked down the corridor once again and saw the monster had his foot back on the ground and was inspecting her weapon. He only took a quick look before he throws it towards her. It rattled to the ground just a few feet from her. Killing you would be easier than I imagined since your gear is utterly useless, but that isn't the reason I'm here, Zesshi Zetsumii. I came here to talk, not fight. Since when did monsters want to talk? Zesshi has a little trouble getting that out. It is a little hard to breathe when it feels like your chest has collapsed. Ainz just chuckles and shakes his head. This was the part of the plan Ainz didn't want to deal with. If his queens were correct and he was good-looking, knowing this girl's inclination, he was about to have a very awkward conversation. In the end, it would be worth it, but uncomfortable is uncomfortable, he supposed. I have no idea if they're showing me off as a trophy or punishing me for something. Ainz brought up his hands and removed his helmet. He looked at Zesshi and said, "See, not a monster." Her reaction was immediate, intense, and completely expected by everyone not named Ainz Olgown. "Please give me babies." "I'll pass. That isn't why I'm here." Ainz knows his words will more than likely fall on deaf ears, but he needed to say them anyway. As he expected, it wasn't enough, and she started staggering her way towards him, repeating, "Babies, babies, babies." "Well, I came here to offer you the chance to kill your father, but if you are no better than he is, I suppose I can just kill you as well." Ainz's statement made her stop dead in her tracks. Hate and rage burned through her, giving her new life. When she directs her anger towards Ainz, it faded in an instant when she witnessed him pull a scythe out of a void of nothingness. It had a somewhat similar design to the one she normally wielded, but this one looked like it was handed to him by death itself. Its twisted, blackwood snath was adorned with jewels that were glowing with power. The blades seemed to be made of a constant swirling red liquid that reminded Zesshi of blood. The blade even seemed like it was about to drip blood at any moment, but that moment never came. Then she noticed his gaze trained on her. His ruby-red eyes felt like they were looking into her soul, and she almost forgot what had made her so mad to begin with. "Do you plan on picking that up?" Ainz points to her scythe. "Or do you prefer to die without trying to defend yourself?" His casual tone seemed to remind Zesshi what had given her new life. She doesn't even look at her scythe, but right at Ainz. "You dare compare me to that monster?" "Of course, how are you any different?" Ainz's statement sent new waves of anger through Zesshi. She was about to grab her scythe and attack, but Ainz continued before she could. "You hate your father because he raped your mother. He did so that he may have a strong child. You wanted to do the same to me even though I said I'd pass. So I ask again, how are you any different?" She can't answer because Ainz wasn't done. "But you are actually worse than he is." Ainz can see that got to her even more. "You may have the same inclination towards forcing people to do things they do not wish to do, but at least he isn't a slave to a bunch of people who see him as nothing but a tool. A weapon to be unleashed on anyone they see as a threat to humanity. What happens to you when there are no more threats to humanity?" Ainz looks at her as if he was giving her time to answer, but the moment she opens her mouth, he continues. If you think they care for you, then why do you hide your ears? If they accept you because you protect them, why do you have to hide a part of yourself? The answer is very simple if you just think. You are the monster to them. You just happen to be the monster they can control. That's not why. I hide them so I'm not reminded of that monster. We both know that's a lie. You blame an entire race for the actions of one and deny half of yourself. How many elves and half-elves do you think are out there right now because of the same reason you are? Do you think the Elf King only raped your mother? How many do you suppose are slaves in this country you protect? You protect those that enslave your siblings, yet you claim to be better than your father. That's very amusing. Who do you think you are? I am Ainz, but I already know who I am. It is you who don't know who you are. I can see now they have influenced you for too long, and perhaps you are beyond saving. I am, however, one for second chances, so I think we will try this. Ainz puts his scythe away and dons his helmet once more. Talk to those you believe care about you, without your ears hidden. Try to buy something to eat anywhere in your precious country, with your ears displayed. Talk to an elf slave, and realize how easy you have it. One day in the future, I will return with the same offer. I hope by then you will realize it will never matter how much you do for them. Those of the slain theocracy will never see you as anything other than a weapon or a tool to be used and thrown away when you no longer have a purpose. I can give you the means to avenge your mother, and you can lead the elven people as they should be. Not by a power-hungry, rapist, tyrant, but by a loving queen. You want to make me queen of the elves? Zeshi's brain can't even process something so ridiculous. I was thinking of making my dark elf subordinates the rulers of the elf kingdom, but they are only in their 70s, so they are still children. My queens thought you might want revenge, and as much as I want to kill your father, your revenge takes precedence over my hatred of a rapist. I will give you time to think. Use your brain for once, and open your eyes, Zeshi's Etsomii. The moment Ainz finishes, he disappears from the tunnel, leaving Zesshi incredibly confused and still bleeding. Nazarick 9th floor conference room, nearly 3 months later. The conference room on the 9th floor was filled with denizens of Nazarick at the moment. All 3 of the rulers of Nazarick were present, along with the guardians, Pleiades, Seabass, Albedo, and Oriole. Tomorrow was the day they would be headed to the Katsa Plains for their confrontation with the Riestai's kingdom and Baharuth Empire. They already had their tents set up on the field, so a simple gate in the morning was all that was needed for them. Ainz had hoped it would be a simple meeting where they would each take his terms of vassalization, but based on the numbers each country brought in their armies, that was a dream. If either had any intention of surrendering to him, the Baharuth Empire wouldn't have brought 60,000 troops, and the Riestai's kingdom wouldn't have brought 240,000 of them. None of this bothered Ainz, Taylar, or Albedo in the slightest. It would allow them to cull the numbers in each country and make their takeover all that much easier. It was a shame that so many people were going to die simply for answering the call of their monarchs, but it couldn't be helped. They were only going to learn how futile resistance was until it was too late to save most of them. Ainz already had his battle plan drawn up in his mind, and both of his queens were well aware of what was going to happen, but he hadn't told anyone else yet. He tasked a number of them to come up with their own battle strategies to see if they were learning as they hoped everyone was. He didn't ask it of everyone because most of them had tasks of their own they were conducting, such as Demiurge, Shaltir, and Mare. The 2 he truly wanted to hear from was Oriole and Cocytus. Cocytus had gotten to learn from not only Demiurge and Oriole, but also his own mistakes. Ainz was eager to see if he was able to retain any of the knowledge Demiurge and Oriole had imparted to him. He was almost as eager to hear from Cocytus as he was to witness the super tier spell he planned on unleashing on the Riestai's army. He also wanted to see what Oriole could come up with on her own without his, Taylar's, or Albedo's assistance. She had been teaching not only Shaltir but also Cocytus when Demiurge was unavailable. Not to mention, Oriole also spent an incredible amount of time with Henry while she was here for her 3 weeks. Not only did she teach her tactics, but she also just spent time with her as a friend. It was great to see her spending time with someone who wasn't falling all over themselves in Oriole's presence because of who her parents were. Oriole still occasionally talked about Henry's face when she took Henry and Nini back to Carne, and she saw the changes they made in her absence. Ainz, Taylar, and Albedo had been taking frequent trips to Carne in Henry's absence to use their super tier spell, True Creation. Unlike the super tier spell creation, which only lets you manipulate the natural environment around you, True Creation was true to its name. They could create anything out of any known material to them and shape it into whatever they liked. The amount of material created and how it could be shaped was based on their caster levels, so it was trivial for them to use it to create buildings. They had opted to go with marble for the construction of the vast majority of the city center they had already created. All around the middle of Carne stood majestic, white marbled buildings. Some of the buildings were businesses, some were administration buildings, and some were high-end housing. The only building not made of white marble was the tallest and most imposing building in the entire city. It was located directly in the center of the city and stood over 5 stories off the ground. The new flag of their kingdom was proudly waving from the top of the building. It was a red flag with a black and white border. In the center of the flag was the symbol of Nazarick in white with the addition of a black and white wing on either side of the symbol. The building was solid black marble on the outside, but once you stepped inside, it was gleaming white marble. This building was to be the City Hall of Carne, and the building Henry would be working out of. Oriole had mimicked Henry's face upon seeing it so many times. Everyone in Nazarick felt as if they had watched it happen. They had sent Henry back with a few books depicting castles, palaces, and the like, so that when this war was over and they settled their rule in the temporary capital of Irantal, they could return and create the floating castle above Carne. Since it would be Henry's residence, they wanted her to choose the design. As long as it wasn't hideous, they would be fine with whatever she chose. Everyone had finally settled into their proper places, and the meeting was about to begin. Before Ainz could get everyone's attention, Demiurge began to speak. "Forgive me, Supreme One. I have not been able to attend many of these because of my own duties. May I ask a question, Your Majesty?" "Go on, Demiurge." Ainz tells the devil. "If I am to understand this correctly, Exalted Queen Albedo will be participating in the battle. Is it wise to have her do so in her current state?" Demiurge asks his question, then motions to Albedo. Everyone already knows Albedo's state being that it is impossible to miss. She was just over 3 months pregnant with the next heirs of Nazarick, but she looked to be more like 6 or 7 months along, not 3. It looked as if everyone in the conference room shared the same concern as Demiurge. Albedo will be present during the battle, but she will have guards with her as she always does. Before Ainz can continue his explanation, Demiurge voices his opinion once more. "Your Majesty, while I believe in the Pleiades as much as anyone, don't you think Exalted Queen Albedo should have more powerful guards? I believe you should reconsider and let her stay in Nazarick while we handle the battle." "I appreciate the concern for your queen's safety, Demiurge, but if you interrupt me again, it will be the last thing you ever do." Ainz makes it a point to glare right at Demiurge. "I said she would be present, not partake in battle. Also, Yuri and the other members of the Pleiades will not be her guards. They will be participating in the battle as they are the ones who need the experience the most. Sebas and Cositus will be Albedo's guards, and she will simply be watching the battle, not doing battle herself. With Sebas and Cositus guarding her, even I would have trouble getting near her, and they have explicit instructions to not even let a fly come within 3 feet of her. Please forgive my foolishness, Supreme One," Demiurge says with a quiver to his voice as he bows to Ainz. "All is forgiven, Demiurge. Just remember to hold your tongue until you have the whole story." He turns from Demiurge to Oriole. "Now, let us hear what you have come up with for this war, Oriole. I am excited to hear what you and Cositus have put together." "Of course, Father. I have come up with 3 battle strategies for this particular battle. One that is the most efficient, one that will instill the most fear, and one that will prove our might, but save a number of lives from our enemies' armies. Shall I go through all 3, or would you like to hear a specific one, Father? I'm impressed you to the initiative to come up with multiple strategies. You have more battle knowledge than anyone in Nazarick, and you have already proven that before you even unveiled your plans. Why don't we hear all 3 of them? I'm sure everyone here could benefit from hearing them. Ainz tells Oriole. The pride in his voice is clear for all to hear. Yes, Father. The most efficient way is pretty simple. You allow me to teleport the Baharuth Emperor, his most trusted aides, and the Riestai's royal family to us. We kill all of them except for Princess Renner. Install Renner as Queen of Riestai's after she swear fealty to Nazarick publicly, replace with doppelgangers or mind control those from the Empire, and have them publicly swear fealty. No one would even have to leave Nazarick for this plan to be put in motion, as I could do at this moment sitting in this chair. Ainz did actually think of doing basically the exact same thing. He would obviously need Oriole to do the teleporting, but then he wouldn't be able to achieve what he really wanted to. The world needed to see their power, so they knew resistance was futile. Doing it this way, everything would be done behind the scenes and no one would witness their might. He was quite looking forward to showing the 1,000-mile astrologer and the slain theocracy the power of Nazarick. That is actually a plan I considered, but the world needs to see our might, and that will not happen if we handle this war like that. What is your next plan? Next would be not only efficient, but also instill fear in everyone who witnesses it. Based on my analysis of the average level of soldiers from each army, the highest level commanders in each army, and area of effect for this plan. If you were to wait, Father, until each army was in formation, and you unleashed your special ability, Fear the Reaper. It is my estimation that only 12 of the 300,000 enemy troops would survive. I believe this would overwhelmingly show the power of Nazarick to not only the Empire and Kingdom, but also the slain theocracy. While that would be efficient, I believe that would just show my power, and not that of Nazarick. Culling their numbers is also an objective, but that is a little too many casualties, I think. Plus, I believe 2 people we are supposed to keep alive would be among those dead. Your last one. Most fathers would be horrified at the fact their daughter just suggested the slaughter over 299,000 people. It didn't bother Ainz in the slightest. What he didn't like about it was it would be over too quickly. As he showed everyone when dealing with the lizard men, displaying power is all well and good, but displaying power with a little flair makes it unforgettable. He didn't want anyone watching to ever forget the carnage that was about to be unleashed. Well, the last one is rather complicated. It will require precise troop movements, well-targeted deaths, well-aimed super-tier spells, and... Oriole stops and Ainz can tell she is getting a message. It was only quiet for a few seconds before she spoke to Ainz again. It seems Prince Barbro has considerably quickened his pace and will be arriving at Carne shortly, Father. Are you sure we shouldn't just send the Pleiades? I'm sure they would love nothing more. Taylar is still a little apprehensive about letting Henry handle this for a little bit. She may have been taught well, but 75 versus 5,000 were odds only Nazarick could overcome, even if the girl has a Death Knight and some ogres. After all that training, I want to see how she handles the situation. I have no intention of letting her, or anyone valuable to Nazarick, die. Plus, we will be watching through Oriole's scrying windows. She will be able to make sure nothing happens to them, if need be. We will send the Pleiades to clean up when needed. Ainz motions to Oriole to cast her spells so they could watch how this scenario would unfold. Ainz was rather looking forward to seeing how Henry's training had gone and compare it to those of Nazarick taught by Oriole and Titus. Carne. The village, no city, actually Henry still couldn't decide on that. Perhaps town would be the best word to describe Carne right now. They certainly had the buildings to be a city, but definitely not the people. Moving the remaining farmlands outside the current wall, and constructing the second wall was not going to start until the war was over. That also went with the population. It wouldn't grow much more than it already had until the war was over. Lord Ainz and Lady Taylar had told her they planned on sending people of many races to Carne in the time following the founding of their kingdom. Irantal would be the temporary capital of the kingdom so that Enri could ease herself into her position. Once the population was high enough and Enri was ready, Carne would become the capital of their new kingdom. Enri had learned a lot in her time in Nazarick. She was taught everything from war tactics to crop rotation to waste management. She was still a bit overwhelmed with her new responsibilities.
While
She thought she could handle her new job, there was always a lingering worry she would disappoint her saviors. She had toured Carne in the weeks after her return and took in the city. It was strange to tour the city you lived in your whole life. If it wasn't for the fact the great forest of Taub was still just as far away, or that the sun would rise and set in the same exact place it always did, or the farms still inside the walls. Enri would think she moved to another city with her family. Learning to navigate your own city again was one thing, but trying to meet every resident of Carne was nearly impossible. Carne recently had a population barely over 100 after the theocracy attack. Now, its population was almost 1,000. Enri was sure she had met everyone by now. It was just hard to remember so many people. The residents were very diverse. They had goblins, ogres, elves, and even a death knight. The vast majority were still human, though. Just about every new human resident was a survivor of a theocracy attack on their village before they came to Carne, or were brought from the other villages so they were safe behind the walls until the war was over. The elves were rescued slaves from other countries and were definitely the second largest race of the population. Since Carne had the only high priestess of the savior of just about every elf in Carne, it took them much less time to get comfortable than you would think it would considering the lives they lived before they came to Carne. They all wanted to contribute too, but none were like the first three that came. All the elves since were former manual laborers. Everything from farm work to mining to servants in nobles' manors. This led Enri to her and Nimu's new living arrangements. Having a bedroom that was bigger than your entire former house was one thing, but having servants was an entirely new experience. Living the life of a farmer had Enri doing things to help herself or her parents since she was a little girl. It was simply what you did from a young age to her. It wasn't easy being a farming family in a frontier village, so everyone had to contribute. Now, she had someone who brought her tea, cooked her meals, cleaned the house, and even did her laundry. It was probably more surreal than anything else. It took some time to let them do things for her, but she eventually just gave in. She saw they really wanted to do their jobs, and she certainly had a job to do now as well. She didn't have the time to clean or cook. There was too much to do around the town, not to mention looking after her sister. The number of things that changed in her life in the past few months would be hard to count. She hadn't even mentioned the rest of her new residents, her new wardrobe, Nimu, or Peter at all. One of the survivors from another village was a teacher, so he took up the position at the school that had been opened for children. Nimu is part of that school, so she could continue the education she started to receive in Nazarick. That wasn't the only education from Nazarick that is continuing. Lupus Regina is still taking her aside to teach her how to throw weapons. Apparently, Nimu is good enough that she brought one of her sisters, Solution Epsilon, to teach her occasionally. Enri was glad Nimu was learning to defend herself, but Solution gave her the creeps. She wasn't exactly scared of the woman. She is ridiculously beautiful just as Lupus Regina is, but there is something about her that unnerved Enri. Enri and Peter were complicated, she supposed. They had gone out to dinner a few times while she was in Nazarick, but it was hard to see each other when she returned to Carne. Not only was she very busy being mayor, but Peter was also an adventurer trying to get to adamantite rank, so neither of them really had a lot of free time. She did enjoy the few times they had been able to see each other since she had left Nazarick. The more she thought about it, the more it seemed this is just the kind of relationship she needed. She didn't have the time to dedicate to someone who was around all the time, so getting to steal a few moments here, and there was just what she needed. Enri was walking towards the temple to talk to Ashrin before heading to check on the small militia's training she had assembled. They weren't even at 100 people yet, but it was slowly growing. She made it a point to check on them recently, knowing Lupus Regina wouldn't be around. If Enri was going to command this militia, She needed to show up regularly so they could see her face and she could see their strengths and weaknesses. Not being able to count on the red-headed maid to show up in case of trouble was a little disconcerting to Henry. She not only saw Lupus Regina as the big sister she never had, but she also knew her might. Oriole had taught her a lot in Nazarick, and it was easy to see why everyone wished for her to change her mind about being the heir of Nazarick. She wasn't just smart. She knew exactly what to do in every situation Henry could come up with, and she was incredibly compassionate from what Henry saw. She would make a great ruler one day if she would just accept it. Henry was coming upon the temple now. The large, pure white temple was always a sight to behold. All the other marble buildings had some sort of color swirling through them, but not this temple. The marble of this building was pure white, without a speck of anything else. She saw Ashrin standing out front as she usually did, and waved to her. She was about to open her mouth to greet her when she noticed someone running down the street towards her. She saw it was Tina, the elf ranger who came to Carne with Ashrin, and she was waving at Henry, trying to get her attention. Henry, thank the goddess, emergency front gate. That was all Henry had to go off of as Tina tried to catch her breath. Henry had honestly never seen Tina out of breath before, so she must have run quite the distance if she was in this state. Tina, just calm down, catch your breath, and tell me what the emergency is. Henry made her way to a hunched-over Tina and began to rub her back up and down to calm her. She had become pretty good friends with some of the elves in the last months, Ashrin, Tina, and Sarah more than anyone. Tina had finally stood up and got her breathing under control and reported to Henry. Henry, a large host is heading towards Carne. They are flying the Riestai's Kingdom Royal flag and number 5,000 troops. Henry almost went pale when Tina was done. She only had 75 soldiers. It was true that 16 of them were ogres and she had a death knight to command, but she didn't think that would be enough for 5,000 troops from Riestai's. Certainly not, since she knew neither Lupus Regina nor anyone else from Nazarick would not be showing up to come to their rescue this time. How far out are they, Tina? Henry gets right into leadership mode. It won't take them long. They are marching quickly and seem to be in a rush to get here. Henry can hear the worry in Tina's voice. Tina, I need you to run to the training grounds and get everyone there to the front gate. Ashrin. Henry turns towards the priestess. I need you to warn the citizens and get them to gather at the back gate. I will head to the front gate after I get Nemu and the other children at the school. Henry, I can be more useful than just rounding up the citizens. Let me come to the front gate with you. Ashrin isn't too excited about not helping Henry in any way she can. She knows she can be more useful than rounding up the women, children, and elderly that can't fight. Everyone here respects and listens to you, Ashrin. Many consider you the high priestess of their goddess. I may have been given some of her knowledge, but you have been blessed with her power. They will listen to you above anyone else. After you pass the message, you may join me at the front gate, but please do this for me. I trust no one more to do it. Henry's final plea must have worked because the elf just nodded her head before running off. Tina left the same moment, and Henry made her way towards the school. She had to get the children to the back gate before anything else. It did not take long for Henry to get to the school. Mimi wasn't thrilled to not be going with Henry, but she listened to her sister and went with the teacher and her classmates to the back gate. Luckily, the front gate was on her way to the school, so Henry simply continued running to the front gate. When she arrived, there was one person there she didn't think would be there. Nfiria, what are you doing here? You should be at the back gate with your grandmother. This is my home too, Henry. I want to defend it. While Henry admired his bravery at the moment, there was a reason she wanted him back there. I know you do, which is why I wanted you at the back gate. Nfiria tries to reason with her. But Henry, she doesn't let him. There are nearly 800 people at the back gate, and only a few of them can shoot a bow above a novice level. The rest are defenseless. I wanted you there, so they had an arcane caster. I plan on sending 10 goblins, including Kona, and 2 ogres as well. Someone needs to defend those people, Nfiria. Now Nfiria looks crestfallen. He didn't realize she would be sending ogres, goblins, and even the goblin healer to the back gate. He didn't really think of those people just stopping the assault head-on. It was probably a good sign that Enri had been put in charge, he supposed. Sorry, Enri. I just wanted to help. I know Nfiria. Actually, do you have any alchemy items that might help us? You usually have something helpful in that bag of yours. Nfiria lights up at the mention of that. He did bring his bag with a few things in it for just this very occasion. He had just forgotten he had it when he thought he disappointed Enri.
Ida.
I have some alchemical glue and alchemist fire flasks with me. Those will certainly be useful. Enri points at the 9 goblins in front, Kona, and 2 ogres. I need you 12 to head to the back gate and protect the people back there. She turns to a red-headed ranger. Brita, I need you to go with them and lead them north in the forest until you come across a building with golems like you see here. Tell them where you came from and what happened. You will be safe there. Tina will set off the signal when it is safe for you to make a run for it. Everyone could tell this was not discussion time with Enri. It was due as I say time, and she wasn't even giving people a moment to disagree as she gave out her orders. Ashrin, Tina, and Sara, I need you to get on the walkway above the gate. Nfiria and 2 goblins who would be good at throwing Nfiria's flasks on the right tower. Jugum, Gobu, and I will be on the left tower. I need all of you up top with me to stay hidden until I give the signal. I need everyone else ready behind the door. We are going to have to draw everyone to the front gate. If they're smart, they will send their cavalry around the back, so we can't escape. We are going to have to surprise them and deal some damage to their ranks if we want to draw the cavalry back, so everyone prepare yourselves. This is what we are going to do when they get here. It did not take long for the contingent of the Riestai's kingdom army to arrive at Carne. The look on most of the soldiers' faces mirrored their princes when they crested the hill and saw the village. It looked absolutely nothing like a village. There were marble buildings and a large wall that went around the whole city. There was even enough space behind the wall for some farmlands to still be there. It was not what any of them were expecting. What truly drew Prince Barbro's eye and anger was a flag flying on the largest building. The building was black instead of white like all the others, and the flag flying from atop, it was not that of the Riestai's kingdom. Prince Barbro had never seen such a flag, but had to assume it was that of this Ainz gown. He was supposed to come to question these commoners, but instead, he would capture them and force them into his army. Then everyone could see what kind of being this Ainz gown truly was as he slaughtered his own citizens. What a wonderful plan I have come up with, and if they resist me, I'll just kill them all to teach him a lesson. The prince can't help but think before they start their final advance towards the village, city, whatever it was right now. The first thing the prince did upon arrival was to send the cavalry around to the rear gate. He saw one in the distance and couldn't let anyone escape. The cavalry would also be able to make it back around if things got dire. He didn't expect this to go anything but smooth. What could a bunch of farmers do against the great Riestai's army? Prince Barbro watched with a haughty smirk as his page approached the gate of Carne. He wanted to get this over with as fast as possible so he could make it back to the Katsa Plains. He shouldn't even be here in the first place. Marquis Raven just wanted to make sure he didn't win any glory on the battlefield and further solidify his position as the future king. He would need to keep an eye on that man when he took the throne from his father. I am the envoy of His Majesty, the Crown Prince of the Riestai's Kingdom Barbro and Dreen Eald Ryle Vazelf. Open the gates now and let us in, the man yells at the gate. What could the Crown Prince possibly want with our little town? Enri knew she had to keep this up for as long as she possibly could. If worst came to worst, and they had to hold out for a siege, the more time she could buy the better. She knew she only really had to hang on for 2 days. After that, the Battle of the Katsa Plains would be over, and those from Nazarick would be here to help them. She didn't really believe they could hold out for 2 days. The wall might have been sturdier now that it was adamantite, but the fact remained, they couldn't guard the whole thing. If the Riestai's army brought rope and or grappling hooks, they weren't going to last long at all. Even if they managed to forget something so basic, there was no way for her to draw the cavalry to the front gate unless she took a huge risk with her own forces. Namely, the Death Knight and Ogres. It would be them, more than anyone, that would see them through this battle if they were to survive. A worthless commoner like you doesn't get the privilege of knowing why the Crown Prince is here. This village belongs to the Crown. I demand you open the gate. Yes, it does belong to the Crown. It is just not the one you are thinking of. Henry wants to say that so badly, but knows it will simply end her time buying ploy if she does so. Time to, how did Lord Ainz put it? Sling some bullshit? I think that's right. Oh, that gives me an idea. Sorry, we aren't ready to receive such an important guest as the Crown Prince. Could you maybe come back tomorrow after we have cleaned up? Henry was terrible at this. You could teach all the battle strategies you wanted to Henry, but nothing she learned prepared her for this circumstance. Trying to stall time by making random small talk with a stuck-up, snotty noble who was hell-bent on insulting you and getting in your town was not one of her strengths. She is half tempted to just unleash the Death Knight now, so she didn't have to hear his ridiculous voice. What nonsense is this now? I demand you open the gate. Dung. If Henry was going to sling some bullshit, she might as well go all in. Wah, dung. What do you mean, dung? There's cow dung everywhere. We can't possibly let the Crown Prince walk in it. Then open the gate for us, and we will enter instead of His Majesty. It seemed Henry's time was coming to an end. There was only so long you could keep a conversation going once you started talking about cow poop. But it's everywhere. Oh no, I got some on my hands. How about you camp out, and we can have it cleaned up by the morning? We are soldiers. We can stand a little cow dung. Now, open the gate. Well, it seemed as if this is finally at an end. At least if Henry survived, she would have a funny story to tell when she was older. There was only one thing left to do. I'll go wash it off my hands and get someone to open the gate. I'll be right back. Once Henry shouted that over the wall, she had one of the goblins take off running. She looked around to make sure everyone was ready and quietly made her way up the left tower. Now all they could do was wait until they got impatient. Prince Barbro was infuriated. They had been here for hours. It had only been minutes, and these simple commoners still hadn't opened the gate. He was starting to lose his patience when he saw a rider coming towards him. Your Majesty, the girl at the gate is going to get someone to open it now. One girl to guard the gate, and no one saw our host coming? It just goes to show you commoners are worthless unless told what to do. We should have this wrapped up not long after they open that gate. They better make it quick, or I won't be merciful to them for making me wait longer. Prince Barbro was about at his wits' end already. Commoners really were the stupidest of the bunch. After 10 minutes of waiting, he had enough waiting. Archers, get in formation, the prince yells out. Your Majesty? One of the commanders asks him. I said, get
in
formation. Those gates should be open. We have waited long enough. Send a volley over the wall and see how much they like that. The commander was about to relay the order when they heard a girl yell from the other side of the wall. Sorry, I'm back. They are opening the gate now. The Riestai's army by the front gate got into formation and readied themselves to march into Carne. The left side of the gate slowly began to open, and the troops started filing in. They had only gotten about 50 men inside the gate when a scream of pure terror was let out by someone. The gate abruptly slammed closed, and everyone heard the screams coming from the other side of the wall. The voice of a girl seemed to carry over the wall straight to everyone outside the gate. We let you in. Why? Why are you doing this? Everyone on the other side of the gate doesn't know what to do next. They listened to the screams from the other side of the gate, then did the only thing most of them could think of. They pushed on the gate. Only moments after they started pushing, the entire area went silent except for the grunts of everyone trying to open the gate. Right when they were about to give up, the gate violently swung open, sending at least 100 soldiers surging forth into Carne. They all wished it hadn't happened. As they all looked up, they heard the most terrifying roar ever to grace any of their ears. The monstrous sound seemed to come straight from the underworld. As they laid eyes upon the creature who made that noise, it had certainly seemed it climbed out of such a place. Standing 10 feet tall in black armor, with a sword that radiated pure malice, stood the visage of terror and violence the likes of which none of them had ever witnessed. The creature raised its sword and swung in an arc towards the front line and cleaved 8 men in half with one swing. The others let out screams filled with pure terror as they turned to flee from the incarnation of death. They were only to be met with a tree branch, serving as a club, from an ogre, and end up as nothing but a red stain on the ground. As the troops in the front tried to flee, and the troops in the rear attempted to push their way in, the entrance to Carne became a killing box. The Death Knight swung his sword left and right as he advanced through the rows of soldiers. Nothing the Death Knight's sword touched stood a chance of still being attached to the person's
body.
The ogres swung their clubs left and right, knocking Riestei's soldiers into the sky like children or smashing them directly in the ground like you would squash a bug. Right as the Death Knight and ogres made their way near the gate, arrows began to rain down on the Riestei's lines that were standing just outside the gate. All they could hear was the clashing of steel and screams of death. No one heard Henry on the tower yelling, Mark II.
Draw.
Loose. Knock. Mark III.
Draw.
Loose. Riestei's soldiers were dropping left and right as they had no idea which direction to shield themselves from. The entrance was so packed with soldiers that a few landed some hits out of sheer volume. It didn't take long for those in the back to realize what was happening and finally begin to retreat. Unfortunately, over 400 soldiers had already perished before they ever came to this conclusion. The army had finally pulled out of the entrance and made it a safe distance away from the enemy arrows. The Death Knight and ogres did not pursue. Instead, they took up a formation outside the gate with the Death Knight in the middle and 4 ogres on each side of it. The gate slammed shut the moment they were in formation, and they noticed a green aura wrapping around 2 of the ogres as they waited. Cure serious wounds, cure moderate wounds. Ashrin let off her Tier 3 healing spell on the most seriously wounded ogre from the walkway above the gate. Sara used her druid magic to cure the second most wounded ogre. The most heavily damaged soldier, though, neither could do anything about. They couldn't do anything to heal the Death Knight. It may be an incredibly violent and resilient undead, but packed in with that many people, it was bound to take some shots. It seemed just about everyone was aiming for the Death Knight, as it was missing pieces of its flesh and armor already. It certainly wasn't about to perish, but it had taken more damage than Henry had thought it would. Henry was about to check where the army had repositioned, but when she turned, she saw a volley of arrows coming. The arrows were not only headed towards the Death Knight and ogres, but 2 whole rows of arrows were also about to come raining down on Henry and everyone else atop the walls. She turned towards the elves to tell them to duck when she saw Ashrin extend her hand towards her and Sara extend her arms out in front of her. Wall of protection from arrows, wind wall. A green globe envelopes Henry, and she knows exactly what this spell does. She looks over and feels a gust of wind erupt from where the elves are. The arrows bounce off the protection spell surrounding Henry and are sent way off course by Sara's wind wall. The Death Knight and ogres were not so lucky. Several ogres have arrows sticking out of them, and so does the Death Knight. One of the ogres fell victim to a lucky shot and fell as an arrow pierced his eye. She saw the army preparing to charge, but that is when she heard it. The rumbling of hooves thundered through the air, and Henry was about to smile knowing that she finally managed to bring the cavalry around front. She was about to signal Tina to send up the signal, but then her heart dropped. As the cavalry rounded the bend, she could see it was not all of them. That meant there were still those at the back gate, and she couldn't send everyone into the forest. The army was also charging at the same time for another attack on the Death Knight and ogres. Another volley of arrows landed right before the charge hit their lines. A round of spears came at them before the melee ensued. The Death Knight took a few of them as they chipped his armor and flesh off slowly. One of the ogres took a spear right in the chest, and he dropped over dead before anyone on the wall could heal him. Ashrin, Sarah, and even Tina were trying to heal the ogres at the front gate as fast as possible. They were just taking too many hits for them to be very effective, and the ogres were slowly dropping one by one. 3 had already fallen, and it seemed as if 2 more were close to following them as the Riestai's army retreated for another charge. Ashrin knew she couldn't keep this up for much longer. She couldn't heal the ogres fast enough, even using tier 3 magic. The moment she would cure one and try to heal another, the one she already healed would lose just as much life again or die. If only she could heal the Death Knight, it could win this for them. Henry, you have to pull them back. I can't heal them fast enough, and we can't lose the Death Knight. Ashrin looked to her friend as she yelled this. She could see Henry's mind starting to work as she started yelling out orders. Ashrin wished she could be more helpful and cursed herself again for being so closed-minded. If only she had understood before, she would be able to save this place. All her doubt made her do was think back to the last conversation she had with Taylar. Goddess? Forgive my ignorance, but how can you be married to death if you are life? Life and death are one and the same. We are woven together for eternity. One cannot exist without the other. Tell me, Ashrin, what do you think of the undead? They are unnatural creatures and a perversion of life, goddess. And what do you think of the dead? Those that have passed on and have not returned? That hopefully they contributed to this world in some way, and one day they will return to a new life, in a body worthy of their past deeds. Some will return, whether it is through reincarnation, resurrection, or other means, but their former vessels can still contribute as well. Just as someone buried in a grave nourishes the soil, a raised body can be just as useful. You live in Carne now. Does a Death Knight not protect everyone in Carne? Do the Elder Liches run rampant killing everyone when they come? Their life might seem unnatural to you, but they are all servants of life, even in death, dear Ashrin. Ashrin does not hear Henry ordering them back inside the gate, nor does she hear Henry tell Nfiria and the goblins to throw the alchemical glue to give them time to get in. She knows there is only one thing she can do right now. She drops down on her knees, clasps her hands together in front of her, bows her head, and sends a prayer to her goddess. Goddess, I am so sorry my mind was closed. I do not have the means to heal your servant, and I do not wish to fail you more than I already have. Please, lend me your power and heal your servant even if you must use my life as the cost. She kept her eyes closed and repeated her prayer. It would not matter, for she could not see what happened before. She had no idea Oriole had opened a gate in the sky just out of sight, or that Ainz cast ray of negative energy directly into it. All she felt was the power. She could feel it descending from the heavens, and as she opened her eyes, she saw a dark purple and black beam hit the Death Knight. The moment it made contact, all of its armor regenerated. It let out a roar that would shake the very hells as it made its way through the front gate after it had been healed. Ashrin couldn't believe her luck. Not only did her goddess answer her, but she didn't take Ashrin's life as payment. Surely she had failed her goddess enough that she would have to pay for such a miracle, but her goddess was so kind and compassionate. Of course, she wouldn't demand anything of Ashrin. She wanted to jump up and down and celebrate with her friend, but when she turned to Henry, she was about to blow into a small horn. Henry had realized right before her friend yelled at her that they couldn't keep up the pace they were healing for much longer. They had been firing off cure spells to keep the ogres alive since they opened the gates and started their counterattack. She could see the Death Knight getting worn down and already knew they had no way to heal him. Undead were healed with negative energy, and none of the casters in Carne could use any spells like that. She had to get them behind the wall and heal, but what then? They couldn't keep fighting this army, or they would lose the only ones who could truly protect them from this army. If she waited behind the walls, though, The gate would fall eventually, or they would finally wisen up and scale the walls. Half of the cavalry was still at the back gate, and if they climbed the walls, those in the rear were done for. She had no choice. She didn't want to, but she had to. 20 goblins wouldn't make much of a difference, but Henry had to try everything possible to save her town. She pulled out the last horn Lord Ainz had given her and prayed it would at least buy them the time to get into the forest. She brought the horn up to her lips. "Please help us, Mr. Goblins." Henry cried out her plea right before she blew into the horn. It did not make the same sound as it did last time. Instead of the little pft noise she got the first time, it let out a sound so mighty, it shook the entire area around Carne. A blue portal opened near the front gate, and her mouth fell open at what came out. If she could see into the Nazarick conference room right now, she would see 3 people laughing, 1 person furiously writing on a piece of paper, and everyone else in the room with their jaws open and eyes wide. The first ones out of the portal were goblins clad in full plate armor. They all had tower shields and axes. They moved in sync like a mobile wall as they advanced towards the Riestai's army. "We are the great General Henry's Goblin Heavy Infantry Corps. We shall crush your meager forces beneath our boots." The Riestai's army infantry charge right at the goblins. They advance in the classic wedge formation so the cavalry can attack the flanks, but before the cavalry can get into position, 2 new squads come from the portal. The squad that emerged from the portal and took up the right flank of the goblin heavy infantry were riding white wolves. They all had on silver armor shining in the sunlight, full-faced helmets with horns stick up on top, and purple capes billowing behind them as they charge their enemy. "We are the great General Henry's Goblin Paladin Knight Squad. Our loyalty and devotion belong to the great General Henry." The squad that emerged from the portal and took up the left flank of the goblin heavy infantry were riding gray wolves, but the one in front looked like it had wings. The goblins had on black metal armor that covered up just enough to not limit their mobility. They wore a black metal helmet with horns coming out of the side. "We are the great General Henry's Goblin Beast Rider Corps, and we are coming for you." The Riestai's army was closing in on the goblin army when a hail of arrows came down on the Riestai's army lines. When they looked farther into the goblin formation, they saw goblins in eye-catching red clothes. It seemed their bodies were not proportioned evenly, and their bows were even bigger than they were. "We are the great General Henry's Goblin Longbowman Corps. You cannot escape from us." The ranged attacks did not stop there. Small explosions started going off on the flanks of the Riestai's army, and it wasn't hard to see who was targeting them. A little farther into the formation was a squad of goblins wearing dark purple robes with red accents. They all held metal staffs in their right hands. "We are the great General Henry's Goblin Magic Support Corps. You shall feel our power in your very body." The small explosions suddenly turned into much larger explosions as fireballs rained down on the Riestai's backlines. These goblins appeared just like the ones from the Goblin Magic Support Corps, but they held twisted wooden staves in their left hands with an orb on the top of it. They were firing off fireballs in sync and doing a ton of damage to the backlines of the Riestai's army. "We are the great General Henry's Goblin Magic Bombardment Squad. You shall feel the wrath of our great offensive capabilities." Prince Barbro watched from his horse atop the hill as his army was being annihilated by an army of goblins. He couldn't believe this turn of events. How could they lose to goblins? Would he really be known as the prince who lost to goblins? He saw the same rider approaching him from earlier. "Your Majesty, they will break through the lines any time now. You must retreat before they do." Prince Barbro could tell that was certainly the case. If he ordered them to stay, the nobles would flee eventually, and that would make enemies down the line. He couldn't be the first one to retreat, though. It would make him look cowardly. "Very well. Give the order to the Baron first." That was the perfect solution. He would retreat, but make sure he wasn't the first to do so. That way, he wouldn't be the cowardly one. The knight was about to voice his understanding before he was beaten to it. Sorry, but you aren't going anywhere. Everyone around the prince immediately drew their swords and turned towards the voices that should not be this close. Their figures seemed to emerge from the shadows as they took in the goblins dressed in all black. Even their faces were completely hidden while they held a dagger in each hand. Protect His Majesty. One of the knights yells as he steps in between the prince and the goblin assassins. Not a moment later, blood is spraying from his neck, and his head is nowhere to be found. The next thing anyone hears is a chilling voice. Too later for that. Standing there is a goblin with two large bottom fangs wearing a red hat. It has on brown clothes and a red belt with a small skull in the center. Metal plates are running up its thighs, and it is wielding a scythe. The great General Henry's goblin bodyguard, one of the 13 redcaps. Oh no, I took too much time introducing myself and won't get to show off. Prince Barbro and the rest of the men on the hill had already taken off. All that was left of the army was retreating as well. The only thing to be heard other than the thunderous fleeing of the Riestei's army was the beat of the goblin musician corps drums. Should we really just let them go? One of the assassins asks the redcap. Strategist orders, something about needing the prince for negotiations or something. As the assassins and redcap watched the Riestei's army flee, they glanced back at Carne. The goblin army had started marching towards the town, and the gates were opened awaiting their arrival. Henry waited at the gate, wanting to greet every single goblin who had just saved her town along with the rest of the residents. Sarah went to get them after she saw Henry use the horn. Nazarick, conference room. Ainz, Taylar, and Albedo had calmed their laughter down to the point they could watch what had just unfolded. Oriole was still furiously writing on her paper, but everyone else had yet to truly recover from what they witnessed other than a few. Demiurge looked calm and collected. Seabass, Yuri, and Narbril had adopted nearly the same expression as Demiurge. Lupus Regina wasn't still looking in shock like everyone else. She had a smile and almost looked proud. It was certainly an odd sight to behold to any who laid eyes on the sadistic werewolf. The first victory of the Psycho Kingdom apparently goes to General Henry. Taylar giggles before looking at her daughter. Oriole, what in the world are you writing still? Taylar had to ask her. She had been furiously writing like a maniac since Henry blew that horn. She was genuinely intrigued as to what she was so serious about. Read this, mother. Oriole shoves a piece of paper towards Taylar as she says that. It was not the one she was writing on. Taylar grabs it and starts to read. This is just Henry's level and class breakdown from after she read that experienced tome and left Nazarick. I already know these things, Oriole. Taylar isn't sure why Oriole is having her read this. It wasn't like she hadn't already. Oriole was the one who cast Analyze on Henry and wrote all this down. She should already know Taylar has read this. Aeon done. Here, read this now. Taylar takes the paper from Oriole, and her eyes freeze after just a few moments of looking over the paper. She starts to giggle as she hands it to Ainz and Albedo to look at. Her giggle soon turns into a full belly laugh as she tries to say, I sure know how to pick 'em. That's all she manages to get out between her fits of laughter. If only every new worlder would start progressing like this, they could sit in Nazarick forever and let them run things. Ainz and Albedo also start chuckling as they read over it. It just intrigues everyone in the room more. Not only did Henry gain experience from using an item, but she also gained the last 2 levels of the commander class. On top of that, she gained Legendary Commander. Did you see the genius label she acquired with it? Father Mothers? Tactical Magic Item Genius. Did Analyze tell you what it meant, Oriole? Neither Ainz, Taylar, Albedo, or anyone else had ever heard of such a thing. Hopefully, Analyze had told Oriole what benefit that gave Henry. It gives Henry the knowledge of who, what, when, where, why, and how any magic item she possesses is best utilized for any situation. For example, if she had the crown of wisdom on her right now, she would instinctively know to give it to Ashrin. Or if Carne was being attacked by rabid squirrels and she possessed a statue of a fox that would repel them all if given to Tsara, she would know to give it to her. I suggest we put a few different low-level items in a pouch of holding and give them to her. She may be able to use them in ways we never thought possible if the horn of the Goblin General is any indication. To Ainz, that sounded like a fantastic idea. The number of low-level, useless trinkets he and Taylar had was astonishing. If Henry could use them in new, more powerful ways, he certainly wouldn't mind giving her what Oriole asked for. It wasn't like they were going to be useful to them anyway. I have no problem with that, Oriole. Do either of you? Ainz looks at Taylar and Albedo, and both shake their head no. Well, that settles it. You can put together a bag for her Oriole after the Katsa Plains and deliver it to her. Thanks, Father. I'm excited my first trip outside Nazarick will be to Henry's home. Ainz can tell Oriole is excited, and now just realized why that was. The only time she had ever stepped foot outside of the tomb was just out front when she talked with Taylar and Albedo before they departed for Irantal many months ago. He was glad she would be able to go out for a bit, but overprotective dad mode kicked in when he realized she wouldn't be in Nazarick and completely immune to harm. Take Albedo with you when you go, Oriole. He can tell she is about to object. No arguments. Albedo has been to Carne with Taylar and helped us build most of it. She will be able to guard and guide you. It's either that or I go with you. Which one would you prefer?
Fine.
I'll take Albedo. Oriole doesn't look happy, but he isn't budging on this. Now that is settled, we have a situation to clean up, Pleiades. Every member of the Pleiades snaps their heads to Ainz, then he continues. I want all of you to clean up the remnants of the prince's forces. Wait until nightfall when they stop. They will be exhausted and you can slaughter them all. Try to keep the kills as even as possible. Ainz tells all of them. Yes, Your Majesty, they all reply back. They get up to start getting ready to head and finish off the army, but Pleiades. They all turn to the source of the sound and look at Albedo. They see her look at Ainz and Taylar and ask a silent question before they both nod. Remember to play with your food and show them no mercy. The ice in Albedo's voice made every smile. Yes, Queen Albedo. They reply to her before setting off. Cositis. Yes, Your Majesty. Cositis replies to Taylar's call. How about we hear your plan for the Katsa Plains before we retire? I know you worked hard on it. I'd like to hear what you came up with. Taylar had a grasp of Cositis' plan already. She wanted to make sure Ainz got to hear it, so she could prove her point. Cositis had come a long way since the Lizardmen debacle, and she wanted to see the look on Ainz' face when he realized Cositis had come up with basically the same plan as him. The rest of this meeting was going to be entertaining to her. She couldn't wait for it to be over, though. She really wanted to head to the Katsa Plain and get this over with. She sat with anticipation as Cositis went over his plan. The look on Ainz' face was priceless, as she imagined. It was a good last meeting before their departure, and Taylar was looking forward to what was to come.
That's it for today. Remember to show your support to the creator of this story if you enjoyed it. If you would like more parts of the story to be uploaded, leave a comment and subscribe to get notified when the story continues. Bye-bye for now, and I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day.